Hi everyone. Just wanted to do a video today just to give you a bit more of an understanding about me and my backstory and why I got into the whole survival prepping thing. So I think it's quite important that I give you my take on why I'm where I am now. So I'm going to take you back quite a while. I'm going to take you back to when I was about 5 years old, 5 years old to begin with. And at that age, we moved to a new house. And this new house, I was one of three boys, so you can imagine how much energy we had and how much our parents wanted us outside. So this new house that we moved to, it was brilliant for us because about 50 metres away there was a large woodland, which was great for us as young boys. And this woodland then backed onto, I think it was about 1,000 acres worth of crop fields, which was even better just for us. Almost every single day we were out there playing in the woods, playing in the fields, doing things, usual things that boys of that age do, making dens, climbing trees, finding bugs. We made sort of rope swings, playing soldiers, hide and seek, just generally being boys and doing what boys do best. Normally we'd head out just after breakfast, sitting on the weekends, and then we'd come back home when we got hungry. That was it, or when it got dark. For young boys, you can imagine it was just amazing fun, and actually it's some of my fondest memories from my childhood. Which I just loved being out in the wild, just out in nature, doing what kids do at that age. And I was also known as a bit of a Spider-Man as well, because I was always up and down trees, so I could normally be found sort of 30 feet up. How I never died is beyond me. Always falling, always just getting into trouble. I was a free-range kid, and that suited me and my brothers just absolutely fine. Around that same sort of time, in fact maybe a bit older, maybe sort of 7 or 8, that's when I developed my passion for fire. Now, unfortunately as an adult, that passion hasn't disappeared, and I suppose I was probably destined to be a survival instructor actually. So around about this age, around about 7, 8 years of age, I, for the first time, lit a fire. And for me as a kid, and I still remember, if I close my eyes, I can still remember that first day of lighting that fire and smelling the smoke and just that smell, and that was it. I was hooked from that point on, which was just brilliant. It was just fascinating from that point. From that day forth, I always tried to find different types of trees, so it was different wood, see how it burnt. There was a few pine trees, and I used to love the stuff with the pine and burning it, and you could just smell like the sap from the pine. It was just such a nice smell, but it burnt really well. And if you took like the sap from the side of the pine tree and you put that on the edge of a stick, you had like little mini torches with it. It was brilliant. Loved it. So much fun. And when I think back on it now, it's just such a great childhood. So that went on, and I kind of became obsessed with lighting fires and burning things, and whether it's paper, wood, leaves, even one time. To this day, I don't know how I didn't die. I got some fuel from my dad's lawnmower and decided to put fuel in the fire, which is a perfectly sensible thing to do at 8 years of age. And to say I learnt some important life lessons that day was a bit of an understatement. I got a bit of a fright. Unfortunately, not enough of a fright to stop me from wanting to keep running with fires, and kept lighting them. Now, my fire lighting skills got really good. I was very good with matches. I was very good with the lighter. I was very good at actually looking at other stuff and found other ways. So I still remember going to the library, and there was a little book that I got out. It's probably about this big. And I've still got a copy actually downstairs in the kitchen. It was an SS Survival Handbook by Lofty Wiseman. Now, I know for most of the people that are listening to this, you're nodding and going, I get it. I know exactly what book you're on about. So that book became my Bible, and there was a few things in there that Lofty was showing you, and I was how to light fires without having a lighter or matches. That was it. Hooked. Morning, noon and night, my job from that point forth, as an 8, 9-year-old at this point, was to try and get fire with 2 sticks, rubbing them together. Took me a while, but I managed it. I eventually managed to make fire without a lighter or matches, and it did. It literally took me months. So that's when I decided that my firelighting skills were absolutely at the pinnacle. I was the boy, I knew what to do. So I decided to impress some girls, as all boys do at some point in their life. And what I decided I was going to do, and the only way I can describe this, it was kind of like a crater. It's probably, I don't know, 20, 25 feet across, but it was like 8 feet deep. And effectively, it was just a hill, but the way it sort of carved itself out, it looked like a crater. 3/4 of the way around, you had the hill, and then at the back there was a huge tree that had fell down. So it was effectively a huge, big, giant log. So I decided that I was going to impress these girls, and I was going to let it fire, and I was going to make sure it was bigger than I was. And I still remember the excitement and my heart racing thinking about this, that I was going to do this, because this was taking me way further than I'd ever been before with it. And I got some matches because I didn't want to mess this up. I had to make sure this fire started, and I managed it. I got this fire going, and it was definitely taller than me, and then it was taller than the small trees, taller than the big trees. It was way above the rim of the crater. How I never ended up getting burnt alive in this crater, I have no idea. Everyone else had disappeared by this point, and it was just me with the girls at the top of the crater looking concerned at me at the bottom of the crater with this fire. So I wanted to get some kudos at school, and I definitely got the kudos after that. But there was an issue with this. So as I said, this fire had a massive crater at the back. Now it was so intense that eventually I had to run out the crater, and I left it. But the problem was, I was used to lighting fires, playing with them for an hour or so, and waiting until they sort of petered out. This huge log that had been sitting there, that's not going to peter out easily. So now, just to let you understand, put a little bit more context to this, this was in September time, which is roughly harvest time. Directly behind the huge log that I had set this fire up in front of, directly behind it, was thousands of acres of wheat. Nice dry wheat ready for harvest. Nice dry warm and getting warmer by the minute wheat. And then it started nice dry warm smouldering wheat. Now I think you can see where this is going. I think you can see what the end result was going to be here. Now thankfully, and I say thankfully because God, I can only imagine the fallout that would have happened if that field went on fire. My paramaniac friend, his name was also David, his dad had got out of bed to start his night shift, and the back of their house directly backed onto the woods, and he seen the smoke and knew something wasn't quite right. So he went off to investigate, and thankfully he did. He realised within about a nanosecond that bad stuff was basically one stray ember away from happening. And he made numerous shuttle runs with 3 or 4 of the neighbours, with basically buckets of water to douse the flames. And thank God he did, because it prevented that disaster. Now, the next few days for me were not fun. I still remember the dressing down I got from my mother and the feeling that I had of absolute shame for what I had done. And it was the usual thing that parents do, is like, pack your bags, we're going on a guilt trip. And there I was, just feeling horrendous because of what had happened. But the important thing with that was I never ever forgot the buzz that I got from that, and what I was basically able to do with 1 box of matches. Now, I'd love to report that at the end of that it cured me of my fire addiction, but unfortunately it didn't. And now I'm basically the same kid but stuck in a man's body now, and I still love fire. I still love being out in the wild, lighting fires and just watching fire. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just a primal thing, I don't know. But anyway, so that's how I kind of started on my whole sort of outdoor survival type mindset. Now, not long after the field opposite the woodland, they sold that field to housing developers. As young kids, we were gutted because in the middle of this island, middle of this field was an island. In effect, it was a raised piece of ground where there was no crops. And it was quite uneven, so as kids, we used to pretend that this was a battleship and it was a sea, and would have usual games that kids do, sort of pirates, all those kind of things. But for us, when one door closes, another opened. when the housing development started, this obviously presented young kids with a really elaborate, exciting and frankly quite dangerous playground. So during the weekends, we went from the woods into this housing development and we'd be climbing scaffolding, making really elaborate dens because we had wood, we had nails, we brought a hammer from my dad's shed, and we made some really cool stuff. And for young kids, you can imagine what that was. It was an absolute brilliant playground. I still remember running around, just laughing and giggling and just having so much fun with it. We're always covered in mud, filthy from head to toe, but life, generally, for a kid, couldn't have been more fun at that point. And then to top it all off, at least once a day, we'd get some free workouts when the security guard would find us climbing scaffolding or stealing wood or whatever it is we did at that age. So he would chase us, which was great because it was just more fun. It added a danger element to it. I still remember the first time he came out, he was probably about 20 feet away from us. And I don't know why he did it, and I'm glad he did. He shouted, he's, "Oi, stop!" And that was it. We were off. I remember my heart racing, the adrenaline going, and just thinking, "Oh no, please don't catch us. Please don't catch us. This is going to hurt so bad if he catches us. I'm going to be in so much trouble." I kept running and running and running, and I have no idea how I managed to outrun a full-grown man. I was probably 8, 9 at the time. But I did it. We got away, and that was it. It was just red rag to bull after that. Every day he would come and chase us again, and every day we'd get that same buzz. Looking back, I can still remember running away that first time and laughing our heads off when we got away with it, which was great. But as I said, one door opens, then unfortunately another door is going to have to close. So it was around about this time that my dad received a promotion at his work. We moved house again. So by this point I was about 11. We moved to a new town, which I was pretty gutted about. All my friends that I'd known since I'd started school, I was moving. Now, I soon came around to the idea when we moved into a new house. There were a few reasons for this. So the house that we were moving into, it was a new build. So we had a building site on our doorstep. Winner. We had all these materials to get up to no good, as boys do on a building site. We also moved to the edge of a town, which meant we had tons of room to run around. There was fields everywhere. There was also a disused railway line that ran through the middle of these fields. And halfway down this railway line, there was an old swing bridge that went over a canal, which was great. We'd never had a canal, we'd never had water. For young boys, it was like kids just getting given loads of sugar, loads of candy, just eat what you want. So it was a whole new adventure all on its own, which was just great. Again, as a kid, looking back in some of these memories now, I just wish I could bottle up what we had at that point, just running through the fields, and I can still smell the grass and all those memories that I had. If you could bottle that up and I could sell it, I'd be a gazillionaire by now. And I always look back on it really fondly. But as we were older, our exploits became a lot more adventurous, a lot more exciting, and probably a lot more dangerous as well. We roamed a lot further, normally along the disused railway line, with a packed lunch this time. So we're going fair distance. We're probably going a good 3, 4, 5 miles at this point. And we get into everything along the way. So there was industrial estates, there were housing areas. There was even a scrap metal merchant, so there was loads of cars. I still remember one day we went past, there was an armoured personnel car that was getting scrapped. That was red rag to bull for young kids. We were in that playing for a whole weekend. It was a great time. And we loved just being outside, being in nature, just doing the things that kids do. Now, my 12th birthday, my parents decided to buy me a fishing rod, which was amazing. That meant that entire summer when we were off school, and I think we had probably 7 or 8 weeks off school, that entire time I spent that entire summer down the canal just fishing, and loved it. Put my wits against the fish and just watched so much of what was happening in nature that I didn't see before because we were charging through fields. I'm probably sounding like a breakdancing elephant, just making so much noise that we've never seen wildlife. We'd maybe see bugs, occasional mouse, something like that, birds, but we never appreciated any of it. And it was brilliant. So we'd sit there and just sit for hours watching the world go by. You'd see things. A few times we've seen deer that I'd never seen before up until that point. was a lot of birds. You'd see cats. It was just brilliant, just watching nature and seeing the tiny little things that happened that normally you would miss. Then when I turned 14 years of age, something happened that just changed my life as a kid. My neighbour asked if I wanted to go shooting with his air rifle, and that was it. I said, I'm in, definitely. Whatever we're going to shoot, I'm there. I don't care what we're doing. Yes. Now, to say I was excited was an absolute understatement. I had always wanted to have my own gun, as you do as a kid. Always playing soldiers, but never had one. Now, in the UK, just to let you understand, firearms, nobody has them. It just doesn't happen. So for somebody to say they're going to take me out, shoot an air rifle, that was a huge deal. Huge. So this became a new obsession, and every opportunity I was always out trying to hone my skills, normally shooting targets. Now, this air rifle, it was pretty crappy, to be quite honest. It was one of these where we snap the barrel in half to cock it. You put your pellet in and the barrel will snap, and then jam it back together. Wildly inaccurate. It was horrendous. Every time you fired it, the spring shot forward and the whole rifle would jump. It was difficult to hit anything. Probably difficult to shoot your own hand 2 feet in front of the barrel, never mind anything else. But that didn't matter. At that point, I was a soldier, I was a hunter, I was doing all these man things, and I was only 12 years of age. 14 years of age it was. So it was brilliant. Now, you've probably noticed when I've been telling this story up until now that at no point did I mention any adults being involved in this. And there wasn't. So all of these adventures that I was having, I wasn't doing this with my parents or any other adult. My mum and dad weren't interested in sort of outdoor stuff. Never did any bad things. He never took me shooting, never took me hunting, never went out into nature. The extent of my dad's day was walking from the house to the car, doing what he had to do, parking the car up, walking back to the house. That was it. That was the extent of what my dad did. And to be fair to him, he had a pretty stressful job, and he was exhausted at the weekend. All he wanted to do was just have the day off from work and not have to worry about chasing 3 boys who were full of energy, getting to that point where it was puberty as well. And he never really wanted to do anything with my brothers or I. So all my adventures, I normally found them on my own. All my mistakes I learned the hard way. All my lessons were my own. I was definitely a free-range kid that loved nature. Now, at the same time, I was obviously in school, which I hated with a passion. Even when I think about it now, I can think of teachers when I think of them now that just, I'll well up and I get anger and I think about how much I hated being in the class and how they just were mean and they were trying to force me to do something I didn't want. Stupid subjects like French, art, algebra, letters and numbers. I just couldn't get my head around that. I still can't to this day. It baffles me. So I couldn't wait to finish every day, and all I kept thinking about was getting out, running about the fields, fishing, climbing trees, whatever it was that involved nature. That's where I wanted to be. That's all I wanted to do. And I watched the clock, and of course, the more I watched the clock, the more I slowed down, the more my frustration would build, the less I wanted to be there, and just it got worse, worse and worse. But the good thing for me, I was a whiz at certain subjects. Didn't study, didn't have to do anything to understand the subject. So things like anything that involved technology, woodwork, metalwork, science, those are the kind of things that really sparked my curiosity. And I always loved solving problems, which is probably why I really enjoyed being in nature, building things, because it was real problem solving. There was no solution to it. This was 30 years ago, 25 years ago. There was no YouTube. There was no internet to go to. The library was a mile and a half away, so I didn't go to the library that often. Anything that I worked out on my own. So when it came to exam time, I didn't do a lot of study. By a lot, I mean zero. Zip, zilch, nada. I did zero study. Somehow I passed all my exams. Weren't great passes, to be fair. It was enough to not feel completely stupid. Was firmly Mr. Average, middle of the pack. Now at this time, don't know why, and still to this day, can't fathom it out because it makes no sense to me. I decided I was going to move out the house while still in school, no less. Couldn't stand my brother and my dad. We were just constantly arguing and fought. There was puberty, there was just typical sort of family things going on. So at 17 years of age, I had the keys to my first house. Well, I say house, it was a tiny one-bed apartment. Now, obviously the most sensible option was to move in with my girlfriend at the time as well, who was 16. So I definitely scored an F for sensible life decisions at that point. When I look back, I have no idea why I did it. I'm kind of glad I did, because it taught me a lot of lessons. So life was great up to that point. I had my own house, I could do what I wanted, nobody told me what to do, and if I didn't want to do something, I didn't do it. So it was worth it for that alone. The unfortunate reality was, for a 17-year-old who was working a weekend job, I had to pay for all this. My girlfriend at the time, she was doing an apprenticeship. She was learning to be a hairdresser, so she wasn't earning much, like literally enough to pay for a lunch when she went to work. So the harsh reality kicked in that we had to pay for it. So come October time, in the UK it gets pretty cold. It was single glazing windows, and there I was, middle of summer, and we had a choice. We had enough money to eat, we had enough money to heat the house. Unfortunately, the heating in the house was electric storage heaters, which for anyone that's used them or had them, you'll realise they're wildly inefficient and provide no heat whatsoever. And they cost a fortune, because it's literally like an element that runs through the middle of it that you heat a block of concrete, and then the block of concrete kicks out heat the next day. And on top of that, because we were under 18 years of age, both of us, I couldn't get credit legally, which meant I couldn't run up an electricity bill and pay it at the end of the month. I had to have a prepaid meter. So I had to go to a few very specific stores that issued you £5 cards that you put them in, the thing would clunk, it would stamp it, and then you couldn't use it again. The problem with those is they were wildly more expensive than if you had credit to get electricity and pay at the end of the month. So that meant we had a choice. We either eat or we have hypothermia. Those were the two choices. So it was either eat or heat the house, should I say. And if we didn't eat, then all was good, we could have heat. If we decided to eat, then we were going to end up with hypothermia. So we decided to split the difference and went hungry and cold. Again, F for sensible decisions. But I remember at the time, even though I was 17, I had this notion of what you kind of meant to be like as a man that's in a relationship. So obviously there's the usual things. I've got to provide, I've got to do the right thing, I've got to have enough money coming into the house. Not only that, getting even deeper into this, for me, my self-esteem would hit like a low point at this point as well. I didn't want to admit to my parents that it was too difficult. I didn't want to admit that I didn't have enough money, that I couldn't do school and work a part-time job. I felt pretty low at this point. Of course, I didn't tell anybody any of this. I just hit that low and kept it to myself. Now, unfortunately, as life went on, it got worse. As the winter went on, it got colder and colder. So the situation just became a lot worse. And it got to the point that we're wearing sort of 4 or 5 layers of clothing and sleeping with 2 blankets and duvets on the bed just to stay warm. Ice in the inside of the windows in the winter. Pretty dire. I felt pretty awful about myself, but it taught me an important lesson that I needed a forward plan. I needed to start putting something in place to sort of prep for these times, because invariably something would come up that we had to pay money for that we hadn't thought of. One such example, the fridge packed in, which unfortunately happened in the summer, so I couldn't just leave the milk sitting out in the freezing cold apartment. Some days you're the pigeon, some days you're the statue, and that's how it went on for a couple of years. And then I decided that I was going to put things in place, and I did that. Put together a plan to make sure that, and it was a small financial plan, it wasn't anything sort of grandiose. It was every week I was going to put £5 by, extra over and above everything else we were doing, and I'd make sure at the end of the month that we had something, so that if we had a tight month for whatever reason, we had that tiny little buffer. That was the first sort of ideas that I had to try and prep for the future. So then I decided that I was going to join the Air Force. That relationship broke down, and I was in a worse situation because I had a new house. I had a mortgage on at that point. So I was 20 when I got my first mortgage. She moved out and I had to pay this all on my own. So I had two choices. I could get more skin and be even colder in the winter, or I could go and get another job. So I decided to join the Air Force. So I went all in and decided this is my plan, that I was going to provide for the future for myself. So I went through a tough selection process over 4 days, but somehow, no idea how, managed to pass with flying colours. And then before I knew it, I was on my basic training. Now, the basic training, there was a lot of time spent outdoors, doing a lot of exercises, a lot of running around with pine poles, up and down hills, through fields. It was brilliant fun. I loved it. There was a lot of younger kids that were there that weren't so happy, that hadn't had an outdoor life, that just didn't understand anything about what was happening. So I finished my basic training and then I went on to my professional training, which was for my trade that I was going to do. So we deployed to Otterburn training area on my first survival exercise. Now this was my point when I kind of went from a boy to a man. This is when I realised how little I didn't know and how much I had to learn. And it was I got my nose bloodied, but I learned a harsh lesson and it was good. Looking back at it now, I'm so glad that this happened. So I went on this exercise. It was called Exercise Moor Trek. And funnily enough, it's trekking over the moors. And to let you understand, I went into this exercise being a kid who'd lived outdoors for the past 20 years. I was at home in nature. I was at home just being out and about. Didn't bother me. Exercise didn't bother me. Taking pine poles up and down hills didn't bother me. I thought, I'm going to breeze this. To just be whole time, smoking my big fat cigar. I'm going to be fine. But within 12 hours, I got my ass absolutely handed to me. And I'll explain why. So, the first thing to try and give you a little bit of a context to this. So this was in the middle of summer. I think it was July, August time. So during the day, nice and pleasant. It was lovely. The sun was shining. The rabbits were running around. Sheep were bouncing around. All these little lambs. Brilliant. So I was thinking, what a waste of time. This is going to be an attendance course for me. When can I get back and do some real manly stuff like underwater knife fighting or whatever it is that I thought I was going to go off and do. But the premise of the exercise was basically to give you almost like a basic exposure to survival. Take you somewhere, give you the minimum of kit, and let you realise that you can survive on your own with a minimum amount of kit. So we were simulated aircrew who'd ejected from their aircraft, and you couldn't be rescued for 7 days, so you had to make yourself at home. Now, the only kit we had was a small tobacco tin. I don't know if you've ever seen these. They're sort of this size. We could put in it whatever we wanted. The only thing we couldn't put in it was money, matches, or a lighter. That was it. So I put things in there, like I went to McDonald's, got little straws. I put like salt in them. I put some garlic powder. I think I put some chili powder. A few things like this that I put inside it. Because I was obviously going to catch all this food. I was going to catch rabbits, birds, I don't know, deer. Everything that was there, we were going to catch all this and I was going to have a slap up feed. It was going to be amazing. Now, we were given no food for the entire exercise. We were given an axe, which was blunt, obviously. We were given a small folding knife, which had a blade sort of this size, maybe 2.5, 3 inches, blunt. A fire lighting kit, so that's a flint and steel. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these. Ferrocium rod, and you basically rub it with a mini hacksaw blade. And we're given tampons, and not just in case we decided to change sex halfway through the exercise, because it's compressed cotton wool. It took me 2 days into the exercise to realise this. Yeah, I thought stupidly it was for gunshot wounds to put in a gunshot wound, but no. Don't know why I was going to get a gunshot wound in the middle of the moors, but that's what I thought. We're also given a map and the clothes basically that we're standing in. So prior to departure, we're stripped our underwear, we're searched, made sure we didn't have any contraband on us, and then we're given a new survival clothes handed to us there and then, which was basically a flying suit and a jacket. A few smaller items like a head over, which like a buff, I don't know, numerous different names for them, which was made of the world's itchiest material, so nobody used it. It was horrendous. It was, I can't even describe it. Imagine like a woolen sweater and just having that around your neck constantly, but worse. It was horrendous. And then wristlets, don't even ask. Tiny little things this size that go over your wrist to keep you warm. Not gloves. No idea why we were given them. So the first night, we're all to make a shelter, which I managed way quicker than anyone else. And there I was, fat, dumb and happy, lying back, proverbial cigar, fat, dumb and happy, in my new survival shelter, super confident, just watching everyone else go about the business. I'd also collected some firewood, light a fire, all over that, easy peasy. It wasn't a fire to keep me warm because it was summer, it was fine, it was just to keep the bugs away because there was a lot of insects biting. Fires were my thing, so I was all over this survival stuff. I'm just going to sit back and watch everyone else swear, curse, hurt themselves. Not long after dark, so the sun went down, there I was, just starting to get sleepy, full moon, no clouds, it was amazing, I loved it. Now I hadn't done a lot of camping, I'd done a little bit, so I thought this is just going to be like camping, it's going to be great. Fast forward to around midnight that night, and I genuinely thought, in the middle of the UK, in the middle of summer, I was going to die from hypothermia. I was lying in my shelter, I was freezing, I was shivering, I just felt like the world was just conspiring to kill me. It was just so cold, my fingertips were all cold, my nose, my face was cold. Now, because I obviously knew everything about survival at that point, having been in the military 5 minutes, I didn't have enough firewood for my fire, so all the nice fire that I had was just a few embers, which was great. I could light a fire, but you need fuel to put on it. So I was kicking myself. I just felt so stupid at that point that I had all these skills, but yet I just didn't think to the finish. I just thought, I'll just put some wood in the fire and it'll be fine. So I was cold and I couldn't think what to do, and I just, all night, it was just tossing and turning. And I thought, no, I'm going to have to get up. I started walking around, doing lunges, jumping jacks, all these kind of things to try and keep warm. And it was the worst night I'd had up until that point. It was just horrendous. It was just so cold, so miserable. Started getting down, started really doubting myself whether or not I could actually do this survival stuff, because I thought by that point I was an expert. And internally I was really sort of beating myself up, and that little voice in my head started about whether or not I could do it. Am I going to be good enough? Can I actually do this? Am I just going to wimp out of this? How could I be so stupid? And I was questioning my own intelligence. All these things going through my head. So eventually the sun came up. Thank God. And as I said, that first night I got my ass absolutely handed to me. Next day, that was it. I was on receive mode. So as the week went on, I was like a sponge. I didn't let anything go unnoticed. I was listening to everything. Anything the instructors told me I had to do, that was it. I was number one person. I was making sure that I did it. So I absorbed everything. So for the first 2 days, we hadn't eaten. Like literally zero food. All we had was water, and we had the purification tablets, which taste like swimming pool. It's pretty, still to this day, I hate the taste, even thinking about it now. So after 2 days, we were given a rabbit, which is great. We thought, yes, we're going to eat so well. Look at the size of these rabbits. Then we realised we had to share it between 4 people. Then we realised how little meat a rabbit actually has on it. There's nothing. So I basically had a leg. Somebody had the equivalent of a breast. There was just nowhere near enough meat. Then the next day, we were given a fish, which was probably about that long. So we maybe had, I don't know, 3 or 4 ounce size. So what's that, 120 grams worth of fish each, because obviously it was between 4 of us again. And then in the 4th day, now this was a bit of a man test that I found really interesting. It was a live chicken. Now, you obviously can't eat a live chicken, so there was 2 options here. You either killed the chicken and you ate it, or you're worried about what was going to happen to Chicken Little and you didn't eat it, didn't kill it, and you went hungry. 50% of the students just couldn't stomach it. They were worried about this cute little chicken being killed and chose to go hungry. Me, zero hesitation. I was starving by that point. I like my food. I'm Joey Tribbiani. I like my food. And I had it cooking within a few minutes, and man, did that taste amazing. I had a whole chicken to myself because nobody else wanted to touch it. I cooked this on the fire and was showing all these different ways to cook it. I had my garlic salt in there, the fat from the chicken. So my little survival tin, I put that in the fire, and I remember for the fat from the chicken, putting it in there and the smell of it and just salivating. I just could not wait to eat this damn chicken. And then it was with this crappy little knife that I managed to sharpen, cutting these little bits off. So tiny little bits, strips of chicken. I was cooking these in the fat with the garlic salt, and I was drooling, just waiting to get this, pick it out with the knife, and it was the nicest chicken I'd ever tasted in my life. Inside the chicken, there was eggs as well. So I had eggs and chicken in the field. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. That was it. From that point forth, I was absolutely hooked. All these worries that I had about whether it'd be good enough, whether I would like it, whether I actually was cut out to do this, all of them gone. I knew from that point, that was it. I was going to be a survival instructor. So we'd been given snare wire on the first day to try and catch our own food. The day after we got the chicken, I caught a pheasant. So even better, I had this pheasant to cook. And if chicken was nice, orgasmic good this pheasant was when I eventually got around to cooking it. Again, some of the garlic on it, the fat from it as well. It was just amazing. It tasted so good. Now, in the middle of the week, when we were getting all these lessons on this survival exercise, we could see all these rabbits running around, and it was infuriating me that there all this food running around, and it almost felt like it was goading us. This became a man test. So I was determined, same as with fire, I was going to light fire with sticks only. I was determined I was going to catch rabbits, and I was going to eat well. So there was me and two of my friends, two of the lads that I went through the basic training with. We're all peas in a pod, all loved the outdoors. So we decided to go for a walk, and we sat like on a ridge line and kind of looked down onto a dip where all the rabbits were running around, just doing what rabbits do, having rabbit fun. And we watched them, and we realised very quickly that there was a lot of sort of areas that were fenced off with like chicken wire, so the rabbits couldn't, and the baby deer couldn't get into them to eat these tiny little, I don't know what you would call them, like baby trees. It's probably saplings, that's the word. And they would eat them, so they were fenced off. Now these were probably about 50 metres wide, and the rabbits would never go past them. They couldn't get past them. They'd always have to go down the length of them to get where they wanted to get to. So we come up with a great idea that what we would do is we'd go down two sides, and then one person at the back with effectively clubs, big giant chunks of wood, and would throw them at these rabbits, and we'd try and hit them. Great idea, and it took us probably an hour to catch the first rabbit. Then after that, once we'd had a system and we'd worked it out, within 2 hours we had 4 rabbits between 3 of us, which again was not enough meat, but for us, we felt like kings. We felt like we were absolutely on top of the world. Nothing could stop us. We were going to be survival ninjas. You could parachute us anywhere in the world, we'll be all over it. So because we'd caught these rabbits, there was the rule that you had to share it with your team. So we decided that, well, 3 of us were out. We're a team. So we created a little Dakota hole fire, which basically you dig in to like a slope. You put a hole there, a hole in the top, and you build your fire inside, so it doesn't give a lot of smoke out. And more importantly, it doesn't, the flames don't go everywhere, so you can't see it. So we sat there and for the next couple of hours cooked these 4 rabbits and ate them. It was brilliant. It was amazing. And once we'd finish these rabbits, I still remember all three of us just laughing our heads off and like uncontrollable fits of laughter, looking down at everyone else probably a quarter of a mile away at the bottom of this hill, and everyone's just mooching around, feeling sorry for themselves. And there we were, eating all these rabbits, just feeling so happy for ourselves. Just watching everyone in the harbour area, all depressed, and there we were, aced it. So the exercise finished after a week, and by that point I was absolutely hook, line and sinker going to be a survival instructor. That was for me. I'd found my calling and I knew what it was I wanted to do. So as time went on, I realised I knew very little, and this was kind of like an epiphany for me. I thought because I'd been in nature all these times as a kid that I was all over survival. So at that point it was kind of like my epiphany. I'd sort of like almost put a wall around myself and decided that I was the expert because of my upbringing as a kid. Once I realised that wall, that mindset and that arrogance, I suppose is the best word, was holding me back, I then threw myself headlong into almost survival training. So as time went on, I did whatever survival training came up. So I ended up becoming qualified as an instructor in the jungle, desert, Arctic, sea, coastal, temperate environments, as well as being qualified to teach ejection and parachuting drills for fast jet guys. I would do dinghy drills for all aircraft types. I could also do parachute dragging drills for the fast jet guys. So that would, if they landed in the sea and they got dragged, how they could get out of that. The dunker, so that's like a mock-up of a helicopter. You put people in it, you put all the lights off, it's above a swimming pool, you put it under the water and you flip it upside down and they've got to escape. So I could teach people that. I could teach basic resistance to interrogation, combat search and rescue, combat recovery. I could advise on rescue of downed personnel, and SERE as a whole, which is survive, evade, resist, extract, which is the all-encompassing term. Very quickly I became my air bases. I became that station's SERE or survival officer, which meant I was the man for survival on that station. I was the central point of focus for all survival training and for any operational planning that had to go on, where they had to take survival into considerations. In short, I was the expert, and that's where I got to. I'd achieved everything I needed to achieve at that point. I couldn't do anything else. I was the grand fromage at the top of this pyramid. Although I was still learning lots, still running a lot of exercises, I couldn't do any more courses. So I want to fast forward a little bit then from getting to that point. So on the 2nd of January 2010, my soon-to-be wife had moved from Scotland to my new unit, which was in Oxfordshire in England. Now at that time, it was the coldest spell in the UK I'd had for a long time. And my home unit was the coldest place in the country at that time. And it actually set a new record. It was minus 18 Celsius, which is 0 Fahrenheit, so it's pretty darn cold. We moved into a new house, which again, electric heating again, and it was so cold. The heating hadn't been on for over a month. They turned off all the water. They drained all the system. There literally wasn't water in the toilet. It was horrendous. There was ice inside the windows. And it took us 3 days from turning on the heating to actually feel even the slightest heat in the house. And it took 5 days before we didn't have to wear a jacket inside the house. At night, if we were sitting down to watch TV or having dinner, we had hats on and we had gloves. It was ridiculous. And I had my big Arctic socks on. My wife had a couple of pairs of those. So it was kind of romantic, certainly for me. As a survival instructor, it was romantic. I could see the romantic side of it. Now, my wife, she's a very patient woman. She's a very understanding woman. She's a very intelligent woman. Now, I said it was kind of romantic and I liked it. Her, not so much. I still remember my wife being tired from the drive down, not getting any sleep the night before. She was emotional because it was a big change for her. She was in a freezing cold house. I still remember her sitting in the stairs crying at the predicament that I'd effectively put her in. So at that point, I felt pretty annoyed that I hadn't done something beforehand. Maybe got the keys 2 weeks earlier, put on all the heating. But more than that, again, it went back to what had happened with my ex-girlfriend when we had the choice of food or heating. And there I was again, I had a choice. I could have done so many things differently. I could have been prepared. I could have thought ahead. I just felt a complete failure. There we were starting our life together for the first time. She'd moved. Well, I'd asked her to marry me. And I'd asked her to move 400 miles away from her family, a whole life that she'd known before we got married, to set up home with me for the 9 months before we got married. So I felt so stupid. I had all these skills, all this know-how, and yet the simplistic stuff of just running a house and being prepared for the simplest of things, which was cold weather, which happens every year in the UK. And there I was. I put up that wall again, this imaginary wall that had limited me. I had all these skills. I could survive in the Arctic. I could survive in the jungle, the desert. And yet I couldn't do something as simple as run a house or set up a house enough that we wouldn't feel horrendous. Or my wife would actually have a house that she could live in without having to wear 6 layers, a hat, gloves and socks to go to bed. And it got worse. I started to really sort of question. I promised her so much. And that internal voice in my head just kept going, you have to sort this. You cannot let her down like this. You cannot. She sold her car. She got rid of her house. She sold a lot of her possessions. She's done all this. And yet you can't even do the simplest of things like provide a home for your wife. How am I going to provide when we've got children? How am I going to be a good father? How am I going to be a good husband? All these thoughts just running through my head and driving me insane. And I remember at one point looking down and seeing her breath misting up inside the house. And that first night we had to sleep in sleeping bags, which thankfully I had. I went to work to get them under a blanket and a duvet. And that morning, again, ice inside the windows that we had to scrape off to see out. So it was at that point, again, I had my second epiphany. I'd achieved all these things as a survival instructor, yet I couldn't provide the most basic things for my wife and for my, hopefully, family going forward. So I made a mental promise with myself on that day that I would never, ever, ever be caught out again, ever. So from that day, I started to research the practicalities of prepping, and that's when I started to really look into it. If the house burnt down, I was fine. I was absolutely cool. I could help us live in a field. I would keep us alive, but that wouldn't work for my wife or for children. She doesn't have any of the knowledge I had. She hadn't had a professional career doing this. And that's when things changed in my head and I had a mindset change and a switch. My whole mindset about self-sufficiency and planning, that was the big thing for me. It was planning. Getting that plan together and understanding that it's great having all these skills, but you have to have something laid out. You have to have a goal. You have to have something you're working towards. You have to plan. You have to know what you're actually doing and not just stabbing in the dark. So I did what any self-respecting guy does. I then went on a kit buying binge for about the next 2 years. So I bought a ton of gear. Some of it embarrassing now when I think about it. Some of it I've still got. And I had numerous arguments, excuses, as to why it was a solution for the many problems that could possibly arise at some point in the future. I must have spent thousands, literally thousands of pounds on some really crappy kit and some pretty crappy books as well. But I did make some headway, and slowly my plans started beginning to evolve. This was in between deployments, exercises, courses, doing things with work, long days, early mornings, all these kind of things. But like I say, I did make some headway. So I gained all this knowledge that I needed. I was happy that we were set if anything happened. I would get us out of it. I could prep for pretty much anything. And then my wife, who I love dearly, threw this massive confusion grenade that changed everything with one sentence. In fact, it was 2 words. And it kind of turned me into a rabid animal trying to seek answers. I became like really desperate. The whole, everything about that I wanted to do, I just wanted to make sure that what she'd said wouldn't, I could work around it. I could have a workable plan. Internally, my whole head was going, oh my God, you are going to be a huge failure. You need to get to grips with this. You cannot be the only person that can do this. You can't keep everything to yourself. What if something happens to you? You're not going to be able to do anything if you're dead or you're in hospital or you're injured. So round about this time when the confusion grenade was dropped by my wife, who again, I love dearly, but man, did she put a spanner in the works. So I'd just returned from a selection board for commissioning as an officer, which I've been pushing for and practicing and researching for months. I'd done well, and when I phoned her when I was on the train coming home, we were both hopeful that I'd be successful, but I don't know, I just had a feeling. You know how you get that feeling when you speak to somebody? When I spoke to her on the train, I said, look, I'll be home in a couple of hours. She said, okay, and I knew something was wrong. And I couldn't put my finger on it, I just knew what was wrong. And when she hung up the phone, she said, I love you. I said, I love you too, that's okay, but no, I really love you. So, right, okay, something's not right here. I put it to the back of my mind and just thought I'm being paranoid. So it was a look in her eyes initially when I went in the house, and it worried me. As soon as I got home, I knew something was not right. And she just sat on the couch and looked at me with these beautiful big eyes that she has. And I can still remember it now, and I can feel myself getting the sweats. I remember looking at her and thinking, what's wrong? And my heart started beating, and I got really worried, and the sweats got worse, and I just knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to ask the question, what's wrong? I started, my mouth was sort of going all dry, and you know, it's like you get that adrenaline dump, just everything was screaming out to me that something's not right here. So she didn't give any indication, didn't say what it was. She just held up something in front of me that looked kind of like a thick pencil. And I just stared back blankly as if to say, what? I don't get it. I don't know what this means. And the 2 words she said to me was, I'm pregnant. And so it was. My son was born later that year, which changed everything. I thought I had responsibilities before. I was a rabid animal before, trying to get all these solutions, all these answers. And they were just magnified now. I can't even put it into words, the fear that I felt at that point. Now, to add even more insult to injury, at this point I was feeling really nervous. I knew that we were going to have a tough time ahead of us. I knew that there were going to be things that were going to happen. I didn't know anything about being a father. I didn't have any nephews or nieces that were nearby. I joined the Air Force, so I wasn't home. I was never around children, so I had all these fears that I was worried about. I remember saying to my wife, what if I'm no good as a dad? And God love her, she's just so nice. She said, you'll be a great dad, and tried to put my mind at ease. But all these voices in my head kept saying to me, you have to be good at this. You have to do this. You have to step up your game. You have to look after your wife and your child when they're born. So I had all these things going through my head, all these stresses, all these worries. And then, in true Air Force fashion, they said, well done, you've been successful. We are going to commission you as an officer. So my son was born later that year. And 4 weeks after he was born is when the Air Force said that I had to start my initial officer training, which was 9 months long. Now, up until that point, I had prepped a lot of things. And again, I was the weak link, although I was a strong link. I was only a strong link if I was there. I had all these skills, I had all these things in my head, I had all these plans written down that made sense to me, but they wouldn't help my wife. I wouldn't help my newly born son. So I then, at 4 weeks old, had to leave my wife and my 4-week-old son, and I still get quite emotional when I think about it. Just when we went to the, so it was RAF Cranwell that we went to, which is where the Air Force does their officer training. I remember being shown to my room and my wife was there, and she came in, she sat in the bed, she sat with my son. I remember that pit in my stomach just felt horrendous. It's like I'd been kicked in the stomach by a horse. It was just, like horrendous. And then the shout went down the corridor, right, say your goodbyes, that's it, we need to get on. And I knew at that point I had to say goodbye to my wife and my 4-week-old son. And my wife, birth was a little bit traumatic. My son didn't want to come out. So physically, my wife still had she wasn't at best. Mentally, she wasn't at best because obviously her husband and the father of her firstborn child was disappearing for 9 months. So she felt horrendous. I felt horrendous for her, and internally I was going through in my head again, am I doing the right thing? Did I just not do it? Did I just take myself off the course? Did I just not do it? And all these things going through my head, whether I was doing the right thing. I can honestly say that was the hardest and darkest 9 months of my life. As soon as she had left, that night when I was lying in bed, and I started thinking and had almost the fear, like a panic, about what was I going to do? What if something happened? What if something happened in the house and I'm not there? My wife is on her own. She hasn't got the skills or the experience to deal with a lot of scenarios or a lot of things that happen. Even something simple like the electricity goes off. What if the water stops? How's she going to cope with a young baby that she was breastfeeding? Well, she's not in the best mind. Well, she's not in the best physical shape that she could have been at that point. So my stress levels built and they built and they built. And like I said, worst time of my life by a country mile. So, sorry, I don't know that. Alexa. So eventually I graduated and moved to a different unit. So I moved to a different unit and life was great again. About 18 months later in the February, so freezing cold, I departed for 2 weeks on the course, which was about 120 miles away. I left behind my wife, my son, and as it happens, my unborn daughter. My wife is 6 months pregnant at this point. And as fate normally does, the first day of the course, the central heating in the house stopped. Now, this was a military Mari quarter, so the engineer came out and he diagnosed that, yeah, I know what the problem is, you need a spare part, which of course he didn't have. So they ordered it, and for reasons which were never explained or that I could fathom or that I ever got to the bottom of, it took 2 weeks to rectify the heating fault. Now at that point I thought I had done a lot of prep, I'd done a lot of planning, I had a lot of things in place, and I did to a certain degree, but for my wife, with what would be an 18-month-old child then, and 6 months pregnant, and having horrendous morning sickness as well, may I add. How women do it, I've got no clue. I take my hat off to them. But she couldn't deal with anything that was in the house. She was dealing with a young child who was getting up in the night. She was dealing with pregnancy, feeling horrendous during the day, getting woken up at night with my daughter, who we're convinced is going to be a gymnast with the amount of movement she did inside. But that was a final nail in the coffin. When I was on this course, I felt horrendous because she had no heating in the house, and the only thing that they could provide was 2 electric bar heaters with a fan in the front of it, 2,000 watt heaters, which churned through electricity at a horrendous rate. I think in 2 weeks we went through £250 worth of electricity. Normally our electricity bill was about £50 to £100 for the month, so you can see just how much that was. but I didn't have anything else in place. The only thing I could say to her was, I don't care what it costs, just heat the house, make sure you, my son, and the baby are fine. So I needed to basically up my game. And that was a final nail in the coffin for me. And that's when I decided no more excuses. I have to involve the full family now. I have to get something in place. I have to plan really meticulously down to the tiniest detail as to what I want to do in every situation. Think of every situation, think of every eventuality, get something down, get it in a checklist, get it on paper, and make sure that no matter what happens, my wife just has to take out that checklist and go, right, central heating stopped, what do I do? Or it's the worst cold snap we've ever had. What if, oh, I don't know, there's an earthquake, there it is, black and white, here's what I need to do, here's why I need to do it, here's the options that I have. So I did some serious planning. And again, this was all born out of that real fear that I had, and I still have to this day, that I'm not doing enough to protect my family. My job as a husband and a father is to make sure that my wife and children are absolutely looked after, they're protected, and I can put something in place that no matter what happens to me, if I get hit by lightning tomorrow and that's it, I depart this earth forevermore, then they're seen to, and I have something in place. Basically, I had to protect my family no matter what, and I would have systems in place so if something happened to me or I was deployed, my family has a checklist that they could follow and be safe, no matter what happens. And that's where I find myself today. I'm now at this point, I've had probably 2 or 3 epiphanies. I've had these sort of walls that have been built round about me that have been self-inflicted walls that have put a barrier up. I've smashed all of these down now, and I'm at a point now where I've kind of transformed to where I was as a survival instructor. I'm now not just a survival instructor with skills, but I've actually brought everything along now so that my family, they've got all these checklists, they've got all these things in place. We now do training with family, simple things. So my son now he's nearly 6. We do fire drills with him. We do, if there's an intruder in the house, what does he do? All these kind of things. If there's an earthquake, we live in the USA now, 200 miles from San Diego, from Los Angeles, sorry, San Andreas Fault. So earthquakes, there was the next thing we've planned. So what happens when there's an earthquake? I've got my earthquake checklist. I've got all these. My wife knows what it means. It's written in plain, simple language. I am now at the point where I've transferred from being someone who's achieved a lot on paper and practically in the survival world. I've now transformed into this all-round expert on prepping and survival and bringing the two of them together. And this all comes down to planning. Just in case you're not sure, planning. That is the key to everything, and looking deep into things and understanding the ins and the outs and the back to fronts, the whys, the what fors, thinking second, third, fourth order effects. And I now have documents that I've produced, got all this together, and it's pages and pages and pages and pages. I think at the last look, it was 45 pages, I think. I've got all there, black and white, no matter what happens. So that's my story. That's how I came to be where I am now. And that's why I'm 100% confident I can plan for anything and everything that happens, barring an alien invasion. I am set. My family is set. I've got everything in place so that even if I'm not around, I'm deployed, or I get struck by lightning, or something happens to me, I now know my family can go off and do what they have to do. So I hope you've enjoyed my story. I hope that puts a bit more context of where I am and why I'm where I am. And I'll hopefully give you a bit more of an understanding of me as well, and what I can offer for you as well, and why I think of things the way I do, and why I'm so meticulous, and why I push things so hard. So thanks for watching. I hope you got something from it, and by all means leave some comments, add in anything that you have, or if you get any questions then please ask away, and I'll do my best to answer.